By the end of 1998, all who had tried to fly a balloon around the Earth had failed. Some had been thwarted by political problems, others by the weather, and yet others downed by equipment failures. Many of those who had tried had been lucky to have survived their ordeal.
I have to ask myself that question, whether I'm willing to continue to expose myself to this danger one year after another in this ballooning endeavor.
But still, more and more balloonists tried.
Richard, the situation is this.
In their last unsuccessful attempt, Richard Branson and Steve Fossett had entered prohibited airspace over China. The authorities reacted swiftly, banning all balloons from their territory. Without permission to overfly China, a global balloon flight now looks impossible. Rival Swiss balloonist Bertrand Piccard is far from pleased.
Just after his flight, I received a letter from China to say, please delay your departure because we want to analyze all the problems that have been brought by Branson's flight over our country.
The previous year, Piccard had gone to Beijing to negotiate permission in person. The Chinese had agreed to let him through, so long as he stayed clear of Tibet and the border with Russia. That hard-won permission has been withdrawn. Now the pressure is on to get China to change its mind. For a balloon to make the world flight, it must travel within a defined band up to 26,000 miles long. So far, the furthest any balloon has flown is just over 14,000 miles when Steve Fossett flew solo in August 1998. Second in the race comes Richard Branson, again with Fossett, in December 1998. In the third longest flight, it's Fossett again when he flew to India in January 1997. And, yet again, Fossett, landing in Russia in January 1998. The only other significant attempt was Bertrand Piccard's flight to Burma in February 1998. By any standard, American Steve Fossett is leading the race.
I have the flight experience now of making the 4 longest flights in the history of ballooning. And so it's very frustrating to be sidelined and just going to watch and see whether someone else achieves the ultimate success.
By January 1999, 4 teams are left in the race, 2 in America and 2 in Europe. All are forced to wait for overflight permission. But for Piccard, China isn't the only problem. He had lost both his co-pilots. Wim Verstraeten had dropped out of the race, while Andy Elson left to set up his own rival challenge.
I think if you hold, Tony, if you hold it.
This time, Piccard decides to fly with just one teammate, a British Airways engineer called Tony Brown. Piccard remains optimistic.
We have to be open from end of November to end of February, just waiting close to the phone, be ready to inflate the balloon and jump and take off.
But there are problems. The Swiss psychiatrist and the British aircraft engineer fail to click. Within weeks, Brown is dropped from the team.
I prefer to fly with somebody I could completely trust also on the human point of view, somebody with who the relation would really fit correctly.
With time running out, Piccard turns to the man who oversaw the design and construction of his craft, a retired Royal Air Force instructor and balloon pilot called Brian Jones.
I was bullied at school, so I hated school, and I thought of myself as a bit of a wimp. And then when I was 16, I discovered the air for the first time. I had a glider flight at the age of 15, and suddenly it was as if, you know, here was it. And then from then on, I was just mad keen on it, and hence the RAF and all the rest of it.
With his wife, Jo, he'd been part of the ground support team during Piccard's previous attempts.
I didn't even consider that I should take Tony's place until, in fact, I think it was Tony that suggested it originally.
Despite all the problems, Jones believes the flight will take place.
I think we will get Chinese permission, and I think we will be off, hopefully before the middle of January.
But it's not to be. The Chinese keep them grounded until the end of January. China is willing to reinstate permission only for the Swiss balloon, but now they are restricted to north of the 43rd parallel or south of the 26th.
First of all, we are flying the only Swiss-registered balloon. All of the other round-the-world balloon attempts are British-registered. And after Richard Branson, Per Lindstrand's team crossed China...
Because of Branson's flight, all the other balloons in waiting remain strictly barred from the whole of China. Then, to everyone's surprise, Piccard's erstwhile teammate Andy Elson declares he will launch despite the blanket ban. Flying around the vastness of China will mean a much slower track. Many think it can't be done.
We're trying something that's completely new. In the past, people have tried to fly a balloon around the world, but they've been planning on going over China.
Elson's balloon is the biggest in the race. He's got more fuel in his auxiliary tanks than Piccard's Breitling orbiter is carrying in total. He claims the cable and wireless balloon can stay in the air for over 4 weeks.
We accepted that the goalposts had been moved and the challenge had been made perhaps 75 or 100% more difficult.
Initially, Elson and his co-pilot track southwest, in the wrong direction, at less than 10 miles an hour. Flying steadily west instead of catching the easterly jet streams, they eventually reach Mauritania, hundreds of miles off track.
The gondola itself, the pressure system and everything apart from the heating was working. The fuel consumption's not as bad as we thought, so we're in with a good chance.
002.
It's depressing news for Breitling, who are still stuck in Switzerland, waiting for the right weather.
For my part,
For Piccard, it's especially frustrating, with more than personal pride involved. He is carrying the weight of an extraordinary family history. In 1931, his grandfather, Auguste, had been the first man to fly to the stratosphere. He came back to Earth a hero and was world famous in his day. Even 70 years later, he's still remembered as a character in a cartoon strip. The fictional Professor Calculus in the Tintin series of books and films is based on the real-life Auguste. Bertrand's father, Jacques, dived deeper than any man in history when in 1960 he explored the Mariana Trench, 36,000 feet down in the Pacific. As a boy, Bertrand saw the launch of the Apollo rockets that took man to the moon. With his father, he met astronauts, scientists, and explorers. Young Bertrand had much to live up to. As a young man, he took up hang gliding and became European acrobatics champion. In 1992, with co-pilot Wim Verstraeten, he won a unique international balloon race across the Atlantic Ocean. Now he is taking on the world. Piccard and Jones know their sponsors won't pay for another balloon.
this is the last Breitling attempt. They've made that perfectly clear, so we have to go for it.
At the very end of the jet stream season, when the high-speed winds they need to get round the world start to fade, the team's weathermen spot an opportunity.
And so when we got into February, we thought, well, that's the end of it. And to be honest, last Thursday I went home and came back very quickly with the call.
This late in the season, the jet stream is starting to fragment, the speeds are not as good as they could be. It's not ideal. I mean, if I'd been allowed to choose a weather slot, it wouldn't have been this one.
When we came, Brian and I, this morning with a car and saw this balloon and realized it was for us, and it's the work of so many people just to allow us to make this dream, to make this ultimate flight that every balloon pilot would like to make. It's very emotional. It's really a strong feeling.
It's the time probably in my life when I have been the most anxious, and I even was sick from this anxiety. I threw up in the bathroom when I took my flying suit to leave the room of the hotel.
Better than most, Bertrand's father Jacques understands the challenge that lies ahead for his son.
I know that it's because of all he gave me for the taste of exploration that I was at that place at that moment to take off, and I just told him thank you for that.
I was wondering how I was going to say cheerio to Jo. I just knew that I would break down and blub if there was almost a crack in her face, but she just looked supremely confident, and she just said to me, go do it. We had a wind of about 4 or 5 knots, quite gusty. We had 32 3.5-meter propane tanks hanging off the side of this thing.
If any of these tanks rupture, there will be a massive explosion.
Underneath, we'd put huge polystyrene blocks just to keep the tanks off the ground.
And that was making this horrible noise. It was not the gondola cracking, it was just the polystyrene blocks absorbing the shocks.
If they stay here, we have no vision on the outside.
The only thing was to actually cut us free. The worst thing you can do is to go up too fast, because you start spilling your helium and it just creates all sorts of problems. And there's Breitling Ultra 3 going up like a veritable rocket.
800 feet a minute.
Two hours into the flight, they are burning far too much fuel. Their pilot lights, which should ignite the propane, are failing, and their fax and satellite phone communications are down. It's a bad start to the flight.
Really, we had a worrying time, and we looked at each other, Brian and I, and said, well, probably we're really not going to make a nice flight. It's too bad after all this effort, all this sacrifice and energy that we put in this project.
To console themselves, they celebrate Picard's birthday.
Yeah, that's nice, Brian.
He's 41 today.
To tap it gently.
Because of Picard's choice of launch site, they've given themselves extra problems. To join the easterly jet streams, they must first find winds to take them south, over the Alps and on towards Africa. En route, they pass over the Balearic Islands in the Mediterranean Sea.
You see there the girl in the green bikini. She's quite nice, yeah?
Very nice.
But she has a big husband with her.
Like the cable and wireless balloon, the winds carry them west instead of east. Their rivals are now over India, 10 days ahead of them. They've just broken Breitling Orbiter 2's duration record for the longest time a balloon has stayed in the air.
3, 2, 1. Wow!
As they celebrate, the cable and wireless balloon flies on towards China.
We've only had one night since the heating broke down where it was a little bit cold on board, but as we're at the high level, when we're at high level going across the Pacific, then it will get seriously cold.
Despite their problems, the Breitling balloon has made it to Morocco. At dawn, on the third day of their flight, things are looking rosier.
Or would you like to deviate?
Everything was working. Again, we had fixed almost everything, and the balloon was flying quite well. And for the first time then, we started to smile and say, well, maybe the goal is within reach.
We're just on the border, on the edge between Algeria and Morocco. How incredible is it for Brian and I to be here when we thought that the season would be over, completely over, already in February. Incredible feeling.
Even if the Breitling balloon were to make it round the world, it looks unlikely they'll be first.
I think there are probably only two ways that Breitling can beat cable and wireless. Way one, of course, is if they run out of fuel.
We win 1 degree if you...
The second way is that weatherman Luke Trullemans can find faster winds to catch up with cable and wireless.
This is the best one, 240. It's incredible, eh? That's very good. This is our play with the mid.
It would be really exciting if we could catch them up over the States, wouldn't it?
To survive at high altitude, Pickard and Jones fly in a pressurized capsule. A fixed volume of air is chemically scrubbed to remove poisonous gases.
This is the first filter change, and so each filter is lasting us about 2.5 days.
If the system were to break down, they will quickly suffocate. Their airtight capsule is 18 feet long, about the size of a small camper van. Hanging from a titanium frame, the tanks hold 10,000 pounds of propane fuel. An extra 4 tanks hang from the corners, a late addition to increase duration, added at Pickard's insistence. 6 burners heat a cone of air under a sealed cell containing 650,000 cubic feet of lighter-than-air helium gas. It's this that keeps the balloon afloat. On top, a smaller cell of helium creates a tent to insulate the balloon envelope from the intensity of the sun's heat during the day and to minimize heat loss at night. But they have a major problem. High up over the desert, tons of ice are forming on the balloon.
In the beginning we thought it would make no problem, but then after a few minutes we saw that all this water who was melting from the envelope was freezing on the gondola and freezing on the tanks. So we had icicles about 2 meters long along the cables and the fuel tanks. When we were above the desert, we were about 10,000 feet high. We opened the hatch, we went out to the fire access, and we started to break the icicles like I do with my children when we're in the chalet in the mountain. It was really fun. And all this ice was falling over the desert where probably it has not been snowing or raining since 2,000 years. So that's ready.
Okay.
Ready.
Ready, 3, 2, 1.
When we go around the world, we need to throw some ballast and we need to have the balloon lighter as possible. So, of course, the empty tanks were dropped. When there were clouds below the balloon, we never dropped anything.
Bye-bye.
They estimate each pair of tanks will last only a day, limiting the flight to 16 days. The weathermen say that's barely enough time to get round the world.
Maybe the camera will.
When the first pair of tanks, I think, lasted something like 31 hours, we were absolutely amazed. We couldn't believe our luck.
This is Bertrand in window cleaning mode with his patented chamois leather, trying to clean some bird doo-doo from the outside of the porthole.
Not only trying to clean, cleaning.
The balloon is going too slowly, and there are other complications.
Okay, because they have a small war going on. Okay. It's just below Sudan, so they are going that way. I don't know exactly where they're going now.
Tripoli, information. Here is Swiss balloon, Hotel Bravo, Bravo Romeo Alpha, transit over Libyan airspace. Do you read?
Now, pressurized and back at 23,000 feet over Libya, they find the jet stream and fly through Egypt and on to Sudan.
We, at that stage, were clearly going to clip the corner of Sudan, and we tried to call them on the radio. We couldn't get any contact with them, and so that was, I think, that was when I sent a fax to our control center saying that I think we should just sneak through.
Fortunately, the Sudanese completely ignore the balloon. Piccard and Jones are slowly closing the gap with the cable and wireless balloon. Their rivals have no permission to fly over any part of China, so they are forced to drop out of the fast jet streams to fly low and slow in winds that will carry them far to the south.
Arriving on the Red Sea on the morning of the 6th of March. Coming from Sudan, heading for Saudi Arabia and Yemen. Flying flight level 215. And if we fly a little lower, we'll get at the right time over Saudi Arabia and Oman to go south of China. And we have to gain as much possible degrees to the south. So I'm going to open the gas valve and let a little bit of our helium go out.
Even though China is still 2,000 miles away, by changing height, Piccard is trying to find slight changes in wind direction that will line the balloon up to avoid central China. But there's a more immediate concern. They're about to enter a prohibited area in the Yemen.
So on one map, that they saw that they shoot down all the airplanes who are coming there, and they shoot without warning. There is still another one who is completely red. It seems to be another danger or prohibited area. I don't know how we can avoid it, because we need a track of 130 to avoid it by the south, but we need a track of 95 to avoid it by the north.
So what's he saying?
So he said that they're working on two different ways to work out this danger prohibited area in Yemen. The weather people are trying to make us avoid it, and the air traffic controllers of the Swiss control are trying to get a permission to go through.
The team in Geneva can't get permission, so the balloon has to drop down to 10,000 feet to change course. They struggle to get back on track. It costs them time and precious fuel.
Okay, Brian, we're climbing. Flight level 190 will be the good flight level to get to China.
Until the 8th only.
In the control center in Geneva, there's an increasing conviction that their balloon might just catch up with the cable and wireless balloon.
They're presently over India. They'll be out of India and to China tonight. We're allowed to fly in China up to 26 north, and the meteorologists are saying they'll take them across China just below 26 north and then out across the Pacific.
But there's a surprise in store. the cable and wireless team have done what many thought impossible.
We're happy that we succeeded in flying around China.
I think they've got probably another week and a half to go at the rate we're doing. It's whether we can make the fuel last that long.
At the moment, Andy and Colin are tracking northeast. They're just over the sea, north of Taiwan, and they're heading up to Japan. And that's what's going to happen for the next 48 hours. When they get to Japan, on the north side of Japan, we think we're going to be able to put them up into a fast-moving jet stream, which will take them to North America.
But for the Breitling balloon, China still looms ahead. After 9 days in the air, Jones and Pickard are about to enter Chinese airspace. They have to stay south of the 26th parallel, as difficult as walking a tightrope 1,500 miles long.
Well, here we are at the Chinese border, just south of the 26 degrees, and a little bit turbulent now as we're heading into the mountains, and we shall see what happens. The first thing that the Chinese controller at Kunming said when we called them up and established radio contact was that you are not allowed to go across 26 North. So that was stated in no uncertain terms.
For the next 1,500 miles, they will skim the prohibited zone. Just a few miles drift north and the flight will be over.
We have to play just at the limit of the clouds in order to have the right speed and the right track. That's why over China, we're just really very low over the clouds. This is what we can actually see of China overhead Guilin on the 10th of March. Everything is perfect with the air traffic controllers of China. They are very nice. They were aware of the coming of the balloon, and we have very good communication.
On 126.1, good day and have good luck.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye. Hotel Bravo, Bravo, Romeo Alpha.
Bye.
The line across China was a straight line at 25.5 degrees north. It was incredible. I think there was a little bit of miracle also to be able to fly so many thousand kilometers in a straight line.
No balloon has ever before flown with such accuracy. They leave China at exactly the same latitude they entered.
You have a wonderful panettone. I will zoom on it. It will put everybody in appetite.
So this is breakfast on the 11th of March at 8 o'clock in the morning, Zulu time.
If you make already your panettone for tomorrow, it will be maybe a little dry, because today it's the 10th. I have to check with your beard. It's a beard of 10 days, not 11 days.
Yeah, okay.
Then, out of the blue, comes bittersweet news.
Just got now an absolutely incredible message that I read. Hello again, Bertrand. I have just been contacted by the cable and wireless control room to say that the balloon is landing 70 miles off the coast of Japan. The reason given is that the balloon is ice-stopped. They plan to land in the sea and search and rescue are with them now.
We found a massive snowstorm in it. It covered the outside the balloon very quickly in snow, added a lot of weight to the balloon. And really that was the point at which we decided we had to bin the flight. We weren't successful, but we don't regard this as a failure. We've just found another way that doesn't work.
It seems that Elson had jumped ship from Pickard's team at the wrong time.
Our solar array couldn't see the sun, so we ran out of electrical power. And so we decided to climb the balloon higher, to go through the cloud to get into the sun. When we went into the cloud, it was snowing, and the snow on top of the balloon made it very heavy, so the balloon came down.
Elson had decided to rely only on solar power with no backup batteries, a foolish error.
I have emotions for them because I know how bad it must be. There's no pleasure for me to know that they have this kind of problems. It even gives a little fear that it could also happen to us, to have the balloon so iced up that we have to land. It would really be sad.
As they come to the edge of the Pacific, the Breitling team face a crucial choice.
When we came out of China and crossed over to Taiwan, the Met people were looking to put us up to Japan, just the way Andy had gone, pick up the fast jet streams over the north of the Pacific, that's the polar jet, into America.
The northern Pacific jet stream, which all their rivals had planned to take, might push them into thunderstorms over Japan. There is a second route, across the widest part of the southern Pacific. Nobody has ever succeeded in taking it. The balloon is at a crossroads, and Alan Noble must advise the pilots which way to turn.
You need to take a decision now, because from this point I go to the south.
If we go north, we'll have to go slow over the Atlantic, and we might run into that bad weather over the Pacific. Whereas here we can go high. Well, I think we should go for this jet, and we land in Timbuktu.
You ask, we do it.
It's an enormous gamble. The southern route is longer, slower, and more dangerous, and the decision is solely based on a prediction that the strong winds they need will appear in 3 days' time. The balloonists are chasing a jet stream 3,000 miles away that hasn't yet formed. If the weathermen are wrong, there's no way home. To catch the southern jet, they must climb high to at least 30,000 feet. But first they have to drop down to throw out all excess weight, including empty tanks, all their fresh food, and sacks of ballast.
Okay, now we're going up at 300 feet a minute, so we obviously did something.
We would look out of the portholes and we'd see these cumulonimbus clouds on the horizon all round us, and thinking, if we fly into one of those tonight, it could just be the end. No warning, you can't see out at night, you fly into one of these things and the balloon's going to be destroyed.
We're over the Pacific now for more than 2 days. It's a desert of water. On the maps, it's Japan. It's water. It's water. It's water. When you take the next map, you have a little piece of land for Japan. And it's water. It's water. All this is blue water.
There's still no sign of the jet stream they were promised, and they're burning too much fuel.
We're a little afraid, Brian and I. We talked about it, have the butterflies in the stomach, and the people in the control center are very nice, and they understand, and they make reassuring faxes.
But then, the reassuring faxes stop. The balloon loses contact with the control center in Geneva.
Our satellite communications with them have been temperamental all day.
Alan Noble tries to communicate with the balloon via the Pacific Region Air Traffic Control Center in Oakland, California.
If we don't have any comms with Oakland in, say, the next 45 minutes, I shall start to get extremely worried. I mean, I think if you've got any overflying aircraft and they give a call on 1215, the balloon is probably monitoring that frequency on the VHF.
No, we don't have anybody anywhere near him.
Nowhere near him?
No, nobody anywhere near him.
Hmm, okay. Okay, so...
That's one of the problems.
Okay, well, we'll talk again in an hour if nothing's happened.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, bye-bye.
Bye.
Noble's only proof that the Breitling orbiter is in the air comes from automatic beacons on board the balloon. It's an agonizing time. He doesn't even know if the pilots are alive.
We did not know where to go. We did not know at which altitude was the good wind. We were consuming far too much propane. We saw that the flight had the risk to fail at that moment.
We can succeed if we have great luck. We can succeed if the winds are with us. And I think we can succeed only if we are guided by God. Otherwise, there are so many things that can happen in the wrong way. Up to now, it's a little bit like if we have been guided. We're on the 12th of March. We really hope we'll be guided safely to Europe or Africa. The most important thing is to get back home safe. But if we can succeed in this wonderful dream, it would be absolutely fantastic.
Flying very high to avoid massive thunderclouds, the balloon is icing up again.
It's just how much weight is on this balloon. What's it going to do to us? Are we going to be able to stay airborne for a while? Who are we going to scream for rescue? We're 6,000 miles from the nearest land base. We had to accept that there was a lot of weight on top of the gondola. And so the probability was that if we went into the water, the thing would flip over upside down, and that we may have to take to our single-man life rafts.
If they are forced to ditch, it could take a week to get to them. Their chances of survival would at best be slim. Still at altitude, wearing oxygen masks to breathe, they depressurize the capsule to throw off more weight and to try to fix an ever-increasing list of equipment faults.
This is engineering at its best. See the flame jump?
We had an awful lot of technical problems, mainly due to ice. We'd lost virtually all of our safety systems. When the autopilot wanted to inject some fuel into the burners, if it didn't catch immediately, you get this huge whoomph, and the balloon would shake and shudder, and it was a fairly frightening experience.
Their track is too far north. Their burners won't stabilize, and they are using too much propane. Now, at the halfway point, 2/3 of their fuel is gone.
It's horribly slow. We're only doing 21 knots at the moment. We're still nearly 2,000 miles away from Hawaii, so we're right out in the middle of nowhere and not going very fast.
Early on March the 14th, the control center regains contact with the balloon.
Balloon flight director again. Just to let you know, we've now received a written message from the crew saying they've completed...
For the first time in 2 days, Picard can talk to his wife, Michelle.
He was a little bit down. It was difficult. So much water. He was also not flying very fastly. And yes, he was a little bit depressed. It's not easy for them.
On board the balloon, things still look bleak. Their fuel usage has increased dramatically, and the speed has dropped to a crawl.
It's awfully cold still, and all the people at all our team at the control center are very upbeat about the speed and how quickly we might be home. I have to say that we've still got 2,000 miles to go before we reach the coast of Mexico, so I think it may be a little bit early to be counting our chickens, but who knows. Everything is going well, except that I've broken a nail, but and I could do with washing my hair, of course, but that's going to have to wait for a few more days yet.
Despite the gloom, 4,000 miles after they last saw land, they have a record to celebrate.
Dr. Picard, could you tell me how it feels to be the official world record holder for the balloon distance record?
The distance record is a consolation prize, so I hope we have the real prize.
Very well put. And
was it good for just waking up? Was it a good answer?
It was excellent. It was excellent. Yes, this is Brian Jones at Mid-Pacific for whatever.
After 5 painfully slow days over the ocean, they find the elusive jet stream, just as the weathermen predicted. It's at this point they receive an ambiguous message from their main ballooning rival.
Well, the message was in fax form, came from Steve Fossett, and it said, "Your flight is truly impressive. I hope you will enjoy a safe flight to Mexico." So it was a genuine comment, I'm sure, of his, that he really didn't want us to go any further than Mexico.
The winds are indeed heading to Mexico, but landfall is still 2,000 miles away. In the meantime, Jones and Piccard face further problems.
So nobody below. I checked.
When they are at altitude, they can drop tanks automatically from inside the capsule.
Okay, it's gone.
But they think that one of the giant propane cylinders has failed to separate. They're worried it could fall at any time. Over land, that could be catastrophic. If they drop down to cut it free, they'll lose the jet stream. They decide to fly on. Piccard and Jones have now been at 32,000 feet for 3 days. At this altitude, their lives depend on the air supply system inside the capsule. But something is going terribly wrong.
Bertrand and I were suffering with lack of breath, really. We were panting. I'd been in bed for, I don't know, 5-6 hours. Couldn't get my breath. And I woke up and I heard Bertrand panting the same.
In fact, both men have been slowly suffocating. Another hour and they would have lost consciousness from carbon dioxide poisoning. It's the most dangerous moment in the flight so far.
We boosted the oxygen in the gondola to not dangerous levels, but high, and very quickly we recovered.
On March the 17th, they sight land. They've crossed the world's widest ocean in 6.5 days and made it to Mexico. But there's little joy.
We'd been spat out of the jet stream to the south. We had a track of about 110 degrees, and we needed 85 degrees. So we needed to find 15 degrees to the left. We needed to climb high. And Bertrand did that. He pushed the balloon right to our absolute maximum altitude we could go. And it was in the last 300 feet that he found this extraordinary track of 085.
And valve closed.
It was precisely that.
Without this miraculous change in direction, they would have run out of fuel over the sea off South America.
We were incredibly lucky at that point, and I know we'd said afterwards that nobody gets that lucky for that long.
Breitling Orbiter 3.
Bertrand, it's Alan.
Yes, hello Alan. We're here, Brian and I together.
How are you and Brian feeling? There was some concern yesterday when you were a bit breathless. Are you okay now?
Yes, our only concern is that somebody in the control center would say you have not enough fuel, you have to stop. That's our only concern. We're really like to head for Africa now.
Oh, we're going anyway.
Bertrand and I had both looked at each other and we had this tacit agreement, I know, almost without saying anything, that we were going to go for it. Even if Alan had said, no, we think that you should land, we probably would have said, on your bike, we're off.
It's a brave decision, with most of their fuel gone and a quarter of the world still to fly. Out of the original 32 fuel tanks, only 3 remain.
And the new map is quite okay.
It's blue.
No, not completely. Look, we're already here, north of Puerto Rico.
Yeah.
Of course, this is blue, but when you turn it without any other fold, you have Africa on the other side.
Oh, fantastic. Fantastic.
On the Pacific.
The Atlantic Ocean is an incredibly daunting thought to cross by balloon.
At the balloon's present speed and extreme altitude, it will take 4 days to reach land and victory. They only have fuel for 2.
There's always blue still.
I was doing my utmost to try to work out all of the sort of the what-if scenarios about the fuel, and really, did we have enough fuel to get to the finish line? Could we get to the coast? I watched the speed in the course of 5, maybe 10 minutes, and the speed went 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100 knots.
The Breitling orbiter is now traveling at over 100 miles an hour. At this speed, Africa is just a day away.
We are now approaching the coast of Mauritania on the 20th of March, 6 o'clock in the morning. And in 5 to 7 hours, we'll cross the finish line. It's incredible. I cannot believe it's true.
Because they went so far west at the start, they have only a few hundred miles of land to cross to win the race.
Half an hour before crossing the finish line, I had this awful idea, what can still stop us? And at that precise moment, both burners went out. And I took a deep breath, relaxed, started again, and finally they reignited.
We've done it! Brian, we've done it! It's fabulous!
Fantastic. What is it?
Come on.
So when we succeeded, we were completely out of ideas and out of emotions. We were just there, a little bit embarrassed.
Can you realize that?
Just amazing. Just amazing.
Why us?
I don't know.
But they're not out of danger. Beneath them are hundreds of miles of mountains, minefields, and bandit country. They have to fly on, with the fuel gauges flickering on zero.
Without fuel, on this kind of balloon, you cannot fly it, even during the day.
Swiss Army knife, obviously the only way to eat foie gras.
Over the desert of Mauritania.
This is the first time we've eaten the same thing at the same time. So let's hope we don't get sick.
If they run out of fuel now, there's no way they can land the balloon safely. They decide to try and make it to safety in Egypt by dawn the next day.
I think if there is one thing to say after this flight, it's to thank that invisible hand who guided us safely during all the flight. I hope we will be guided also for a safe landing.
They have no clear indication of how much fuel they have left. The gauges are showing empty on all remaining tanks. They simply have to get down. Landing is one of the most dangerous parts of the flight. If their fuel is spent, they'll lose control of the balloon.
Open the other gas valve!
I had no idea we were going to touch the ground, which is an awful thing to say.
The first time we touched the ground, it was not on purpose.
We've bounced 300 feet after this first landing.
Can you check the time? 6 o'clock.
It's fabulous. Thank you. We could look all around the horizon through 360 degrees and there was nothing but absolutely flat, barren land. And it seemed quite appropriate that we were there on our own.
That's how much fuel we've got left. After 3 weeks. After 3 weeks. And 40,000 kilometers. What a wonderful piece of planning on our behalf.
Bertrand put it beautifully in Geneva at the press conference when he said we took off as friends and landed as brothers.
It's water that was freezing in the gondola. Stop, stop, stop.
'em. They wait 7 hours to be rescued.
Good landing, that one.
Done, John.
Yes!
"200 years after man first took to the skies, Bertrand Piccard and Brian Jones have made the ultimate balloon flight. They have flown 25,361 miles in 19 days, 21 hours and 47 minutes in the Breitling Orbiter 3 balloon. They have traveled further than any balloon in history and stayed aloft for longer than any aircraft of any kind. They have completed the first circumnavigation of the Earth in man's earliest form of aerial transport, in the last great adventure of the 20th century.